welcome back to the question where you have the questions and I have the answers. And today we're talking about the Third Amendment, which is basically the government cannot force soldiers to stay in your house. Well, they can't force you to keep soldiers in your house, and you're like, wow, that's oddly specific. And the answer is yes. Back in the colonial times, during the whole descent into tyranny, the King George, the King George, uh, would have British soldiers, go through the colonies to commit other atrocities, and then basically made the colonists house them and feed them, even though that even though the people did not consent to the government and the British army being there, and much less staying in their house and having to actually pay to feed them and keep them in their house. And so we made the Third Amendment, which is like, yeah, the government can't do that anymore. And it is arguably the least relevant amendment that we have because it comes up very, very not that often. Which I know, proper grammar, we're doing so well. But no, it really doesn't come up that often. I think the last time it came up was actually 2020 during the BLM protests, because in a lot of larger cities where these protests were happening, the military was deployed to keep the peace, which include the National Guard, and you probably saw videos of tanks and people in uniform walking down streets. And that was the question of whether that was violating the Third Amendment or whether that would violate the Third Amendment, because they didn't know where these soldiers were going to be kept. Because not every city or every surrounding area has a a military base. But I know in Washington, if the National Guard was called in, they'd probably stay at Joint Base Lewis McChord or another surrounding base. But also, we have a lot of bases because we are, one, closer to Japan and other overseas countries, and two, we are a coastal state, so we have a big navy here. But for landlocked states, I don't know if it applies or if it's like the same deal. So if they don't have military bases, where were they gonna stay? And if they had to stay in the city, if the city had to feed them, if people had to keep them in their houses, would that then violate the Third Amendment? And the answer is, I don't know. I never really thought about it, and I don't think it actually came to anything because we're not discussing it right now. Right now we're discussing Trump's acquittal and can we use the 14th Amendment to somehow still get him in trouble because he was acquitted? And the answer is, I don't know, probably not. If you ever have to resort to some niche law to get someone in trouble, 9 times out of 10 it's not going to work. Because that's what they tried to do with Andrew Johnson, who was the first president to be impeached. They used, well, he violated this thing, and then they ran it through and it didn't work. He was acquitted as well. And it's just, let's move on with our lives. But yeah, no, so don't know if it's ever been violated, don't know how often it comes up. It's very, very niche amendment that was made for a very specific reason, and that specific reason hasn't happened officially again since the creation of the Constitution. So that's all I have to say on that matter. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.